Welcome back. My name is Martin Cowan, and I am the author of this book, Fabian, Libertarianism, 100 Years to Freedom. And I hope you will try to find it at my website, www.martincowan.com. This is the second lecture of Lesson 1 of my course on Basic Economics. The name of this first lesson is the Luddites, and I've chosen to break it up into 3 parts. The first part, which was before this second part, was about the historical and cultural context of the Luddites. This second part will be the story of the Luddites. And the third part will be some conclusions that I would like to draw from the story of the Luddites. So let us begin part 2 and talk about the story of the Luddites. I will be quoting from a novelist because she describes so beautifully the concepts which I hope to communicate in this lecture. Geographically, the story of the Luddites starts in Arnold, Nottinghamshire, England. This is near the city of Nottingham, located about 112 miles north-northwest of London. The Sherwood Forest is located in Nottinghamshire. You will recall that Robin Hood lived in the Sherwood Forest, and that the Sheriff of Nottingham was Robin Hood's nemesis. Sherwood Forest is an actual royal forest in Nottinghamshire, England. The current size of Sherwood Forest is a little over 1,000 acres. The name Luddites comes from a probably fictitious apprentice named Edward Ned Ludd, who is said to have destroyed textile machines in the late 18th century. General Ludd, as the fictitious leader was called, supposedly resided in Sherwood Forest like Robin Hood. The Luddite uprisings occurred against a background of global war and poverty and unemployment caused by related economic disruptions. The disruptions were terrible. To lose one's job was life-threatening. The Luddites were philosophically influenced by the French Revolution, which, as you will recall, occurred about 22 years prior to the Luddite period. In particular, the Jacobins heretofore mentioned were a great influence on the Luddites. Nottinghamshire, Yorkshire, and Lancashire were hotbeds of radicalism where Jacobin groups met in secret. The first attacks on Luddite property, on private property, occurred in Nottingham in November of 1811. Attacks in Yorkshire, about 38 miles northwest of Nottingham, and in Lancashire, 84 miles northwest of Nottingham, followed in 1812. The textile machines were destroyed in nighttime raids with sledgehammers. The English novelist and poet Charlotte Bronte, whose dates are 1816 to 1855, writes of one Luddite attack in Yorkshire in her 1849 novel Shirley. And in this novel, she describes the mill owner. And I want you to pay close attention to the characteristics of this mill owner. Quoting, "At the time this history commences, Robert Moore had lived but 2 years in the district, during which period he had at least proved himself possessed of the quality of activity. The dingy cottage was converted into a neat, tasteful residence. Of part of the rough land he made garden ground, which he cultivated with singular, even with Flemish, exactness and care. As to the mill, which was an old structure, he fitted up with old machinery, now become inefficient and out of date. He had from the first evinced the strongest contempt for all of its arrangements and appointments. His aim had been to effect a radical reform, which he had executed as far as his limited capital would allow. And the narrowness of that capital and consequent check on his progress was a restraint which galled his spirit sorely. Moore wanted to push on, forward, was the device stamped upon his soul, but poverty curbed him. Sometimes, figuratively, he foamed at the mouth when the reins were drawn very tight. Continuing the quote, "The period of which I write was overshadowed one in British history, and especially in the history of the northern provinces. War was then at its height. Europe was all involved therein. England, if not weary, was long worn with resistance. Yes, and over half of her people were weary too, and cried out for peace on any terms. National honor was become a mere empty name of no value in the eyes of many, because their sight was dim with famine, and for a morsel of meat they would have sold their birthright." Charlotte Bronte goes on to describe the battle and then the aftermath of a Luddite attack. Quoting again, "It was no cheering spectacle. These premises were now a mere blot of desolation on the flesh front of summer dawn. All the copse up the hollow was shady and dewy, and the hill at its head was green. But just here in the center of the sweet glen, discord, broken loose in the night from control, had beaten the ground with its stamping hooves, and left it wasted and pulverized. The mill yawned all ruinous with unglazed frames. The yard was thickly bestrewn with stones and brickbats, and close under the mill, with glittering fragments of the shattered windows, muskets and other weapons lay here and there. More than one deep crimson stain was visible on the gravel. A human body lay quiet on its face near the gates, and 5 or 6 wounded men writhed and moaned in bloody dust." End of quotation. Between February and May of 1812, larger mills in Manchester, about 58 miles northwest of Nottingham, and Stockport, 51 miles northwest of Nottingham, were burnt down and perhaps 50 people killed. The Luddites even resorted to assassination, killing a large mill owner by the name of William Horsfall. Here is a description of the murder from a book by Minter, Discovering Old Huddersfield, Part 2, 1995. Quoting, "The Luddites had no great difficulty in selecting a victim, William Horsfall. An outspoken opponent of the Luddite cause had gone so far as to install a cannon at his mill to defend his machines from attack. More importantly, because once a week his journey to and from the market at Huddersfield took him past the Luddite headquarters at Lloyd Bridge, and so put him within their reach. On that fateful Tuesday afternoon, the mill owner called for his usual drink at the Warren House, after which he continued up the turnpike towards Dry Cloth area. Unknown to him, 4 armed men had concealed themselves in ambush behind the wall of a plantation on the left-hand side of the road. The 4 men had a great deal in common. They were enthusiastic Luddites. They were croppers by trade. 3 of them worked at the same cropping shop, and 1 at a cropping shop close by. And they all had taken part in machine-breaking attacks, and they were all under 25 years old. As Mr. Horsfall approached the plantation, several shots were fired, and he was severely wounded. Seeing their victim fall forward onto his horse neck, the assassins made their escape. Mr. Horsfall was assisted back to the Warren House, and despite medical attention, he died some 36 hours later. His last words are reputed to have been, "These are awful times." British soldiers, police, and magistrates were mobilized against the terrorists. In 1812, the, quote, "Destruction of Stocking Frames, etc. Act," close quote, was enacted by Parliament and received royal approval on March the 20th, 1812. The destruction of mechanized looms became a capital offense. The law was set to expire March the 1st, 1814. During the period of the act, between 60 and 70 Luddites were hanged. Following the harsh legal response to the Luddites, organized terrorism ended in 1813, but only after the destruction of thousands of frames and many deaths and injuries. Thank you for listening to Part 2. The next part we will discuss some conclusions. Please tune in. Thanks very much.